Welcome back to the All Hazards Prepper Show. I'm your host, Blake. This is the first show of season 2. We are so grateful to be back with you this season. This season, we have some exciting guests lined up, and today is one of the exciting guests that I get to have on. Someone I've been following for a little while now, and definitely a topic I think everyone needs to talk about, and something that always has interested me, which is disaster communications. And today we have Clayton Watson, the founder of Disaster Communications, on the show. Clayton is a trailblazer within the disaster communications field, guided by the motto, get information and give information. Since the early 90s, Clayton has been dedicated ham radio operator specializing in emergency communications. His journey began with pivotal roles in civil defense, collaborating closely to relay critical storm reports to the National Weather Service. Clayton's influence extends across multiple volunteer agencies, including ARES, which is the Amateur Radio Emergency Service, Skywarn, and Amaron, which is the American Redoubt Radio Operators Network. He plays a critical role in coordinating and enhancing communication networks during emergencies, ensuring accurate and timely weather alerts to safeguard communities and enable effective response efforts. Clayton's efforts and commitments spans from pre-disaster preparedness through post-disaster recovery, consistently bridging the gap between affected areas. A seasoned participant in emergency drills and grid-down scenario training, Clayton leverages his background in broadcast engineering to test and refine communication equipment. His channels serve as a vital resource for those seeking knowledge on navigating communication challenges during disasters. Clayton continues to lead the charge in integrating advanced technologies with grassroots volunteer efforts, ensuring resilient and life-saving communication infrastructure during critical times. So let's welcome Clayton onto the show from Disaster Communications. Clayton, I am so glad to be with you today. I've been following you for a little while. This is a topic that is very important, something that I really want to focus on here on the All Hazards Prepper. So let's kind of kick us off. We've had some things that have happened just recently with the crowdsource outage, and just a few months ago we had the AT&T outage, which definitely affected a lot of users. Let's kind of, I guess, dive into where we are in the world of communication systems. What do you see as vulnerabilities, to the communication systems here in the U.S. and what is the disasters are really you're worried about affecting our communication systems?
Well, thank you, Blake. It's an honor to be on here, and congratulations on your second season starting that. And that just shows you that there's definitely a lot of interest out here in this community doing what we do, basically, anywhere from just communications to farming to gardening. And there's a big demand for this kind of information, and you see that coming now, even like after you said, after the crowdsource. And that's usually when we see like channels, our social media channels and stuff get a big uptick in activity is, people are becoming more aware of the vulnerabilities. Back in the day, it was only the crazy preppers that were the ones that were getting prepared. But I always said, well, wait, the Boy Scouts taught us to be prepared for anything. Now the Girl Scouts are doing that and so forth. I think now people are starting to see that because we're so technology reliant, that it doesn't take much. These systems are very vulnerable. And Blake, from your background in emergency management, you guys know the shortcomings of communications and how vulnerable they are, especially if after, for example, in 2005, when Hurricane Katrina hit, that was one of the things the House report found was the failure in communications, and it'll pretty much paralyze the community and relief efforts, especially more on the emergency recovery side of it. So that's obviously a little more like a bigger subject than just a crowd strike and the inconveniences there. Basically, like even here in our area, people were saying, yeah, I went to the bank, tried to withdraw some money from the ATM and wasn't able to do that. So that's even more a little broader of I still could call it a disaster. I mean, it's not like what we're thinking of, like hurricanes, tornadoes, or, volcanoes or Yosemite blowing up out there in the news. We saw it kind of doing a little bit of activities, but what we do is we train for anything. I feel like if you train for a hurricane, you're going to be prepared for anything. So if you're the rules kind of mirror each other, so like what might happen with the cell phones going down, whatever you practiced and prepared for let's say a hurricane tornado or a Joplin tornado in 2011, the EF5 that wiped out a lot of the community there. If you're prepared for that, then something like the AT&T outage or a crowds, the internet, or not being able to get your money out of the bank. So if you're prepared for one, you're prepared for all. So that's kind of the fundamental where shows like this are very important. My slogan is get information, give information, and that's one of the backbones. The main primary focuses for me for communications is so you can get that information. If the phones are down, the cell phones are down, we're so used to being able just to at our fingertips within 2 or 3 seconds get information from grandma. Hey, are you okay over there? And not having that, it's we're starting to see people panic a lot more. And have you been seeing any kind of uptick like that on your side of things? I know in our world and even just reading comments and stuff, it's people are concerned, honestly.
Yeah, we just look at last Friday. I'll take an example. My wife, she works in the healthcare field. She called me. She said, "Blake, I can't do patient reports. I can't do, pull up our schedule, or I can't even clock in." And people. She said people were just like in the hallways, like, "What do I do?" No
Mhm.
clue of that there's paper and pen right there. You can do. Got to go back to doing it the old fashioned way. But yeah, people. It seems like whenever there's a communications issue, whether it's an IT outage, or a cell phone outage, it's people panic because we rely so much on our cell phone now, technology, and that's how we really communicate. And especially social media goes down, that's like a big freak out moment for people. People really need to learn to get away from some of those things. While they're great, technology can be your best friend, but it can be also your worst enemy. And you really got to
Exactly.
find some continuity plans, or having some plans in place on some things that you can use for alternative communication. That's what I call it, is alternative communication. And yeah, I get as an emergency manager, I get a lot of the reports coming out of CISA, critical infrastructure groups that are meant to protect the nation's critical infrastructure. And we're seeing a lot more threats and targets towards these systems and IT outages, and certainly cell phone outages and things like that. Not just because of it might not be by design. It might be just by like crowdsource. It was a simple issue on the back end where they were
Yeah,
trying to update it, and it didn't work. And next thing you know, it has thrown off the entire world. So
well, and I think
yeah.
that I don't recall, but I think the AT&T report was similar.
Yes, it was.
Some new, and the joke online is, somebody the new guy uploaded the wrong file or something. But that shows our weaknesses. And honestly, that's now I've always trained to be prepared for anything, and that's what got me into emergency communication. You'll hear that term MCOM abbreviated a lot of times, but that's what kind of got my pursuit of this at a very young age. I started in the mid 90s when I was still in high school. And, we had tornadoes come through our area here in the Midwest. And I remember as a kid, I would ask my parents, we were in the basement, I'd say, where is the tornado at? And all we had was the local FM radio station. And there you're kind of relying on another human being to give some kind of report, but they didn't really have the technology like we do now, where you have advanced radar apps and stuff like that that will let you see all the rotation, and you can make better judgments on our own a lot of times now. That back then we were just kind of relying on somebody would call in on the radio station and say, yeah, the tree's down over here. So, and I just remember the fear that came over me as a young person, not knowing where the tornadoes were. Just all I know is we're in the basement, and it's loud thunder and all this. And so that kind of started back then. Now I'm going to age myself a little bit, but we actually had something called the Civil Defense, and they handled a lot of the tornado sirens and equipment like that. So I remember going in there and I said, hey, I would like to learn more about the weather and stuff. So, and then that's when they said, well, you need to go check out this. This is the group of guys and gals that help the Weather Service get that reports and the ground truths. And then you go into a lot of science behind that. But so we didn't really call them storm chasers back then. That's kind of since taken a new name or new But back then it was more storm spotters. They would set up in zones. A lot of your volunteer firefighters would go out different areas, and they would set up and help relay that reports back in. And just not to nerd out too much, but a lot of people don't realize, but the radar doesn't actually tell you if there's a tornado on the ground. It just shows rotation. So they use ground truth, or people like Blake and I, or volunteer firefighters or law enforcement out there in the field during the storm saying, hey, yeah, there's power flashes, or we see a funnel. And so that gets relayed and helps those forecasters make more accurate, timely, forecasts. So this all for me started back then. It wasn't so much that, I thought the end of the world was going to happen. I just, we live in a world where things do happen. 2019 California wildfires, the government did a study on that and said one of the big failures was the communications. When those wildfires happen, they'll hit the cell phone towers. Those are usually put up on mountains, and those catch fire. There's no communication. There's no comms. A lot of your emergency services are put up there, like your law enforcement, a lot of even ham radio. Now we have means because we're not as complex as like your local law enforcement radio system. We can change in other words, like a local law enforcement to reprogram their radios. You have to take it to a radio service. They've got to go in there with, computer code plug and reprogram it. Where in the field, we can change our frequencies right away. So that's why we're easy to adapt and help relay like that. But that stuff happens. And let me go to the other extreme. In 2007, Southwest Missouri had a historic ice storm. You're talking, there was places in northern Arkansas that 2 or 3 months was without power. Just so you know, the cell phone sites require power to run those. And so that stuff happens. So my goal is just as part of, having food and water and a lot of other emergency preparedness is the communications. And I think communications is vital. Just like you were saying, your wife was talking about them not being able to get different things. Now imagine if she had no way to communicate to you directly and say, hey, just so you know, everything's out here. We're not able to do our reports. Fortunately, you still had your comms or your texting ability, but we put all of our eggs in one basket nowadays. It seems like even now we do I just canceled my cable here at home, and we do all of our TV watching online. So now even more, we're getting all of our news, we're getting all of our information off these devices and connected world. But what happens when that connection breaks? And so I think it's vital. I think knowledge is power, and information could save your life. If a dam's about to break or something like that, and you're in an area that has, tendencies to flood or storms or something like that, if the grid is down or I posted, I'd have to go back and look to be exact on the date, but there was a tornado outbreak, and most of every radar site in the U.S. quit uploading the data and the alerts to the National Weather Service headquarters. And what happened is when they upload all that information, all the watches and warnings, it goes to one server, and then that gets funneled out to like all the media, all the alerts and the NOAA radios and all that. Well, something happened, and I would say only like of however many, 600 or 700 of these sites or whatever, maybe not that many, but only 4 or 5, just a handful was still working. The rest, the whole nation went down. And so we actually had tornado warnings in our area at the time. And the reason I noticed it, I was like, well, wait a minute, I'm not getting these alerts on my NOAA radio anymore. And so being able to still get that information other ways or to relay that information. So these things happen. And when you put all of it based on one source, whether it be the intranet or, having everything go through there, that's, I don't know. I was always told, don't put all your eggs in one basket. So.
Yes, and I feel like that's what a lot of people today. If that cell phone's not working, they don't know what their next way of communicating is. Even if, and that's something I try to instill within family. I've started to work on it a little bit. Is if this is down, here's some ways to communicate. Fortunate working in the government, I have a GIDS card, which is we won't get too much into that, but it's essentially a way Homeland Security provides for public safety agencies to kind of override the cell phone towers and get priority service
Mhm.
when something is happening. But I only have that, and no one else in my family and my wife doesn't have that. So anyway, but yeah, I think we really need to look at, like you said, food and water. Those things are just as critical as a way to communicate. Knowledge is power during a disaster. You need some ways of getting those information that weather alert, or that information that's coming down from the local officials or state officials or federal officials, depending on the disaster we're dealing with. Really we need to look at ways to do that, and that's what we're going to do here on the next segment. But those are some great stories there. The Skywarn Spotter program is something that we still do here, and every time that we have a severe weather event. We've had some severe weather, some flooding here in the Carolinas this week, and I'm on a chat group with the National Weather Service, and every time something happens, they put Skywarn is activated, and I turn on my scanner, and that way I can kind of listen to some of the Skywarn reports that are coming in, and I can kind of hear what's going on. And my wife thinks I'm crazy for doing so, even though the storm could be
Oh,
many
no.
miles north of us. But
Yeah, yeah.
I think it's just cool that that type of reporting and that type of communication still exists to this day. I enjoy turning on the scanner and scanning through some ham channels and listening to that. Me and Clayton were talking about before. I have means of hearing ham. I don't talk on ham, but I have means of hearing it, and I'm working on getting my license hopefully soon to be able to talk. But we'll get down the next segment. But I think ham radio is definitely a try something that's well tested, and it always works. So it's cool to see it always that Skywarn is still, after all these years, is still around and still being used to this day. And the National Weather Service, like Clyde said, tornadoes they may show radar indicated. That doesn't actually mean there's a tornado on the ground. It's really those people, those first responders, or those Skywarn spotter trained people that are the ones that are calling what's happening, so that way the National Weather Service can improve their watches and warnings as that storm or winter weather or hurricane or whatever we're facing, that natural disaster we're facing. They can really improve their messaging from that. So
Yeah.
yeah,
And
great.
and even after the let's say after the disaster, now you're like you just described, Blake, really well. What kind of information can I get? You're not crazy for being the one listening into that, because I think some of the best communication starts with receiving. Start by listening. That's an awesome way to get intelligence, get informations. You don't have to be military or anything like that. You're just common sense, honestly. Like, you're listening what news and information, what actually is happening out there. Is it safe for us to go outside, or should I be bugging out? Where do I need to go? What's the best route to get there? Like, if the road's flooded in this area, a part of your town there in North Carolina, do I need to go this route? What's this, what's safe? And then once you have that information, the next step is establishing the communications with family, friends, maybe your group, if you have a preparedness group or something like that. And man, it could be anything. It could be a tornado, EMP, economic collapse, the ATM's not working, people are rioting, and actually, holy cow, if you watch the headlines, there's something almost every day. And
Every single hour.
I just saw that they were protesting on the East Coast, and on some riots and stuff, civil unrest, food shortages. It could be, man, we never talked about pandemics before, but now after 2020, people are realizing that it's not just earthquakes, hurricane, tornado, Chernobyls or whatever. So getting that information ahead of time helps you, because having that information can honestly, it could save a life.
It could. Yep.
In our area, we had a flood here. We actually had a flash floods. What was it, Saturday night, I think, here. But it reminded me of something that happened a couple of years ago. And we kind of live in a tourist area, and these tourists were here, and we actually had flash floods then. Well, they actually drove their car down, did not know this area flooded, this particular road they were on, and it actually took them and put them in the water and swept their car away, and it killed the family while they were on vacation. So I'm just just straight off the top, I say everybody needs a weather radio. Don't Everybody should have one of those, even if it's a portable one you take with you. There's a lot of information that you could get off of that, and learn how to use it. But in my house, we have three of them, and I don't want to sound like I'm just talking tornadoes or anything, but I'm talking for our house. That's something we deal with a lot, weather warnings. But we see out in California right now, a whole community just got burnt down from the wildfires out there, and so that information's out there. Power's down, telephone's dead, cell phone's down. Local TV could go down, radio could go down. So learning how to get that information can help you and your family stay alive. I believe that 100%.
Absolutely. I think this is really hitting on, why people need to prepare, not only for, that disaster, but like Clayton said, after that disaster occurs and communication's out, you really are going to want to be able to talk maybe to your family or friends locally, or, wherever else they're living. But not only that, just getting information, and weather radio is definitely a great way. We're going to take a short break here on the All Hazards Prepper. We're going to be back with Clayton, and we're going to dive into what you need as a beginner level and then immediate and advanced level to really talk about communicating and things that you may want to have during a disaster. So we'll be right back. This episode of the All Hazards Prepper is sponsored by Artisan Farms. Just the other week, I was going through my emergency food and was like, wow, I have so many products from Artisan Farms. This is because their products are affordable, they're easy to use, and what I love about Artisan Farms is that there are so many different options, not only for emergency food supply, but for everyday needs. Go check out Artisan Farms. I think you will be amazed with what you will find on their website at artisanfarms.com. They offer several products for emergency food, from emergency food buckets to even smaller little products that can fit in a go bag, even products that are dry good products such as butter, cheese. I have their peanut butter as well. I've used their butter before, and it is incredible. Tastes like real butter. Go check out Artisan Farms at artisanfarms.com. Use the code theallhazardsprepper for a 10% discount when checking out. Again, Artisan Farms is what you need to survive any disaster, and is great to have, especially as we are getting into peak hurricane season. So go check out Artisan Farms at artisanfarms.com. Again, using the code theallhazardsprepper for a 10% discount. We are back from the break here on the All Hazards Prepper Show. Again, I have Clayton with Disaster Communications on today. We are really diving in to what you need to know and have when a disaster strikes, after that disaster occurs, and ways that we can communicate. We are really going to dive into next what physical resources, what you could go buy out there, kind of starting at a beginner level, then we'll kind of go to an intermediate level, and then to that advanced level once you're there. But, being Clayton, we're talking about, earlier, just that weather radio. Clayton, maybe talk about, what are some things that, grandma, grandpa, somebody that doesn't want to go out and get a ham radio license, or, something else. What are something, some things that people could have that they can go buy on Amazon for, relatively cheap to get some information during or following a disaster.
Yeah, and the thing too, Blake, is that I understand not everybody's going to be nerded out and you don't have to be nerd to do this either. Let me throw that out there right away, because that's a lot of times, even let's just talk about my family. My wife, and I've got a 16-year-old daughter, so that's a whole nother rabbit trail right there. But none of them want to do anything like ham radio. But let me also say they do understand the purpose of being prepared, and so it started me on a journey of, okay, this now, how do I take my hobby that I've been since early 90s, and how can I tie that in? Because I know the power of the communication skills and the advantage, but how do I actually bring them into it? I think rule number one, let's just understand too, that I don't think everybody's going to be a comms person, a communication person in your preparedness group, whether it's your family plan or whatever. And I was telling some folks, I'm like, man, I'll try gardening, I'll do whatever. I'm not a mechanic. So there might be people that you need to network with maybe could help. Like my car worked on today. There's no way I could have changed out the throttle body. Now, if you ask me how to wire the low voltage side or something like that, more of the electronics, that's my wheelhouse. So I think number one is, as long as we all know our specialty, maybe there is someone that likes to talk a little more. So let them focus on being the main comms person. But I really think in order for the network, when I say network, I'm implying like your family communication network, or your family group, or your family group, or friends and family group, however big that may be, starts locally. Let's start with just your household. So in my example, if I'm out, my wife's at work, and I need to get information from her, number one, are you okay? Are you safe? And here's what I've heard. What have you heard? Exchange some information and make a decision. So rule number one, just know that not everybody's going to be the specialist. So that's okay. You don't have to have that pressure on you that you got to learn to take this test. You got to study this to do this. I think everybody can get started, and it's a lot easier than we think. But for the first rule thing, definitely get a weather radio. I think every house should have at least one. I've got 3. I've got a basement and upstairs. So I've got one in the basement, I've got one in the kitchen, and they all have what they call SAME. You want to get the ones that's got the SAME, and that's what that stands for, specific area message encoding. And what that allows you to do is, you may not need to know if there's a tornado, because the weather office, like ours, covers 38 counties. So I don't need to know if there's a tornado, you know, 10 counties north of me that'll never even come close to me. So you set your warnings to go off, like the one that's next to my bed is set to just tornado warnings and any governmental warnings, which I've never heard. And hopefully we never hear anything like that, like aliens attacking. I'm just joking. But anyway, so set those specific ones for your county. Severe thunderstorm. A lot of times I'll get that information before the cell phone alerts go off. And again, if a storm's already taken out your cell phones, don't rely on that. Now, I like to think of 3 different levels for communications. Like I said just a minute ago, you not everybody's going to be the expert level. That's and you don't even have to be that. But to start out, you could do something like a little FRS radio. And if you understand basic radio communication, it'll help you determine how to build this network with your family and friends. But just know an FRS radio, that stands for Family Radio Service, you're talking maybe a quarter, maybe a half a mile line of sight. So most communication is done by line of sight. And it's kind of like a flashlight. How far can you see the flashlight? Well, if there's trees in the way, that starts blocking the signal, or as we would call it, attenuating the signal. So as long as you know the limitations of communications and what radios work around that, you can build a pretty good plan. So for around my house here, maybe like a neighborhood watch, let's say FRS radios. That's our beginner level. That's the first place to start. You could get those Amazon, Walmart. It's those what we call bubble wrapped radios. The bubble packaging. The antennas won't come off, so there's no way to get like extended range out of them or anything like that. It's license free. So I say everybody should have one of those, because even if that's not my main communication goal, I'm going to have one just so I can start scanning on it, or going through all the different channels to see if somebody in the neighborhood happened to be talking on there, because I don't want to talk to them necessarily, but maybe I'm just getting some information from them, like with an old police scanner. That's probably even another tool then, is right away, let's just go ahead and bring up a police scanner. You can get these. I remember going to a flea market one time and finding one of the older scanners for like $5. Well, the police aren't on that anymore, but it still does FM, kind of like AM, FM, like you hear in your car radio. So a lot of like the FRS radios, a lot of your fire departments, rural fire and stuff still uses FM radios. And so VHF, UHF, that's the range that a lot of that's on. It's line of sight radios. You can get a little radio like the police scanner like that and still hear some of that stuff. So the next step would be something like let's say like a trunk tracker. And the budget's going to go up on something like this. And I kind of think I understand why they did it, but they're a lot more advanced radio. But that's going to pick up what your current law enforcement's using right now. A lot of them across the nation are going to a mode called P25. So it's just different than FM and AM. It's a different way of communication. It's a digital mode, so they can do a lot more with that signal. But that, if you want to hear stuff like that, you're going to be looking at stepping into something like a Home Patrol by Uniden. Unfortunately, they're a little pricey. They're about $500 to $600. Now, there is a way of using these cheap SDR, software-defined radios, on Amazon. You can get these things for like $30 for a little USB dongle, and they actually have software that's, a lot of it's free, you can get, that will turn your computer into a trunking, P25 receiver. So there's ways to do it. Now, you'll have to be a little more techy on that to program it and such like that. So, and all of this varies with different agencies in the community. So, not every agency's on P25. Most of your law enforcement's gone that way, though. Now, that's kind of what I would recommend for bare minimum. Everybody should have at least an FRS radio that they could, but just know that you're not going to get far out of that. That's just going to be your local neighborhood watch kind of mentality on that. Or if you're hiking or on a trail, or your family's gone to an amusement park or something like that. The next thing I would say after that would be more of an advanced mode. And this is something I've just recently, I feel like I'm going backwards on myself, but I actually introduced this to my family just recently, and that's GMRS, General Mobile Radio Service. And it's kind of like ham radio. You do have to get a license for it. Nice thing is you don't have to take a test for it. So the license through the FCC is $35, and that covers you for 10 years. Now, the cool thing about it is it covers you and all of your family, and it can be extended family. But the problem with GMRS is it's still line of sight. So you're talking, at the most, 10, 15 miles. You get a little more power out of it. They do make mobiles that you can hook up and get a little better range. But those mobiles, you're spending maybe $150, I'm guessing, and you could hook an antenna up on your car and stuff and get a little better range. You could hook up one on the house, and an antenna on the house, and improve that range, but it's still a line of sight. So if you're in a valley, and you cover all that valley pretty good. If you're on a hillside, but if you have a mountain or something in between you, it's going to be hard to get to that other side. So what a lot of people will do is throw like portable repeaters, put it on a mountaintop. And a lot of communities already have GMRS repeaters. There's a website called mygmrs.com. And I'm not affiliated with it anyways, but you could go there and search and see if there's some repeaters. And I just did this with our area, and I found a repeater here there's 3 in our area. 2 of them are really nice. One of them was open, what they call an open repeater, meaning anybody could go use it. And the other one was you had to request permission. So you had a little questionnaire you had to fill out and just get permission. And the guy approved me for it. And nothing too dramatic, but those radios are a little more than the FRS. The handheld units are maybe, you can get some really nice ones for around $100 or something like that. But and I would recommend something like that for a little more advanced. And so FRS is going to have a lot of kids and stuff like that on it. You might have some interference. People think of like the old Citizen band radio, and that's another tool you could have in the toolbox is CB. But you kind of know how CB kind of got a little lawless, I guess you'd say, or just a lot of rebels on there or whatever, FRS is kind of similar to that, but GMRS is just a little more professional. And with them already having repeaters out there, you can even set up your own repeater in your area. So that's a little more professional, gets you a lot better range. The radios I got came from B-Tech is the company, and I believe the model number is GMRS Pro. And they've got a nice feature in there where they actually have GPS capabilities and a texting option. So again, my wife and daughter don't like to talk, and I don't know, I guess they talk without the radios, but one, they don't like talking on a repeater or a radio thinking there's other people can hear them. Obviously, something happened at a disaster, they'll key it up, but now they will send a text on there. And so these radios actually have a texting feature, and it allows you to text through the radio. kind of like the old days of having to put in a keypad, and type in your message that way. They do synchronize with an app, and you can text through the app without cell phone service. So that's kind of something that I could see them using. And then your expert mode is the last level that I call, and this is just my opinion. I kind of standing back looking at it, and doesn't mean it's a written in stone or anything, but my last level I would say is more your ham radio, and that opens up a whole lot. Now we still have VHF, UHF, and let me rewind just a second. There's 3 levels of ham radio too. So you have technician class, which is the first level, then you have a general class, and then you have an extra class. So there's 3 levels of ham radio. The technician class will get you on what we call VHF, UHF again. So very similar frequencies to the law enforcement, your public works, your school systems and stuff like that. So local communications. But where a lot of our magic happens is when you get to the general class, and that's where we get to the high frequencies. The high frequencies is kind of the military's backup. They still have a MARS, military amateur radio service or something like that, I think is what that stands for. But even the military, they have redundancy for their satellite communication system that they use, and they still have ham radio operators that work with them directly through a company or an organization called MARS, and that may be auxiliary. I think military auxiliary radio services, what that stands for. But so they have redundancy for their system, but those HF high frequencies are the ones that our communication now can go from anywhere from like 100 miles to 2,000 or 3,000 miles. So the way our signals bounce off the ionosphere that's kind of charged by the sun, and I'm trying to avoid all the nerd stuff here, but that's how it works. Our signals skip off the ionosphere, and that skip range could be anywhere from 100 miles all the way up to 2,000 or 3,000 miles. So now that's obviously important for global communications. Let's go back to like Hurricane Katrina. So I already know that at least 50 miles, let's go 50 miles, is already affected in Katrina's, wake and devastation. So if I live there, I already know that I'm probably not going to get any information. Maybe you might get some stuff on Simplex, what we call Simplex is not using the repeater that I was talking about earlier. So I might be able to get some information off of the FRS. And I mean, that's just a really bad situation that happened there with the flooding and everything too in Katrina. But you could set up command centers, and a lot of hams went down and set up portable command centers. So there was no email, no cell phones, no nothing like that. But we can actually use our HF radios, and we hook computers to them. Not only can we do voice communications, we can do digital communications, which is one of the more popular modes for emergency communications. So just that area around Katrina was affected. There may have been no internet, nothing like that. So loved ones are trying to do what we call health and welfare checks. So they're trying to find out if their family members are okay. So what we could do is connect to, let's say from Louisiana, they could connect to a guy in, let's just pick Missouri or Tennessee or North Carolina, somewhere up the coast, and able to go, this is all autonomous too. You can send an email through your HF radio, and they can start sending emails back and forth to their loved ones directly. That's a way to communicate directly with a loved one outside of that affected area. But again, the budget's pretty high. The goal with all this is to pass information, get information. Maybe I'm not in that affected area, but I can at least monitor some of the traffic that's going across on these like hurricane watch nets that we have on the high frequencies, different health and welfare traffic. After the devastations, I've listened to some of that, and you can relay information in and out and stuff like that. So that's kind of that's a lot of information, but that's kind of a quick summary, honestly. So I would say start with the basic and get you a weather radio, get you some FRS, practice receiving, get a shortwave receiver. That's a good way to get in there and listen to, and man, you could get these little Texan PL365s, and I think they actually have a new model number now that's got a keypad on it. But you can get anything from a little handheld portable unit to a desktop unit, and you're maybe talking $60-$70 for something like that. But start listening to the ham radio out there on the high frequencies, and it's a lot just to consume at first when you're first being told about it. But a lot of times I'll post a picture of ham radio on the HF world, and you hear people talking back and forth and exchanging information thousands of miles apart. And I like to say the original social media. That's it's kind of how you got information back then. And hey, our weather here is 52 degrees, sunny and all this. So and that's a whole nother avenue too. Forecasting something we can learn to do off grid like that. But start with a good little simple shortwave receiver, a weather radio. Start listening to the people communicate that does this full time, and you could really learn a lot from that.
Exactly. Great information there, Clayton. A lot there to that I think hopefully some people were taking some notes there. Like you said, I think everyone should have a weather radio. Having just I think I've showed that before here on the show is that little orange radio that's got the AM FM weather radio, and then it's also got shortwave. Shortwave is another form of AM FM. It's kind of older, but during a disaster, government agencies, other places might use shortwave to broadcast information. And then moving, just I like you said, I mean, people, again, we're relying too much on cell phones. If you got, a lot of people live near family, near friends. They might be able to use that FRS radio. And it's good just to have, say got to evacuate, and I have some, and my plan is if I have to evacuate, I'm taking both of our cars, and maybe I'll put one in my car, put one in my wife's car, so that way we can communicate while we're evacuating. If cell phones are down, which if we're evacuating, I think a lot of people think the cell phones could be down just due to disasters, but cell phones can be down due to just people overloading the system. And during a disaster, we see that all the time. Is that
that's happened to me.
Yeah. I mean,
Yep.
that's one of the biggest issues I've seen as an emergency manager. You get, I mean, even like special events, you get a couple thousand people in an event center, and you lose cell phone coverage. And that's something as an emergency manager I've had to plan for before. Like people are like, "Oh, we'll just use our cell phone." No. We have these fancy radios. We're going to be using our radios.
I would let me throw this as a freebie in there. And I was trying to pull up the numbers here too. I can't find it, but the cell tower can only hold so many voice calls, and then it can hold so many digital calls, what they call digital being like your texting. It can hold more texting than it can voice calls. A lot of times, and this is part of our communication plan here, and establish a plan for your family. You have to write these out. There's a bunch of them online that you can give you some guidelines. But like one of our comms plan is first thing, send me a text. Send a text first, and then try to make a phone call, because a lot of times that text will go through when the phone calls won't. And you, sadly to say this, but you hear about more in the active school shooter situations. The phones go down. Sometimes the government allows that to happen sometimes because, like you said, they have priority situations where they need to make the calls for the emergency. So I always start with, have phone number card, get a little contact list, get that laminated, phone numbers, list of phone numbers, on this comms plan, decide a meeting place, start with home, then expand outwards if you need to. If it's a really big situation, maybe put your phone in airplane mode to conserve battery, and then maybe the top of every hour turn it on for like 10 minutes. You can get even a little more advanced. Husband, call your wife on the hour. Wife, wait 5 minutes afterwards if you need to. Send text, And so there's a lot of comms. There's the 333 plan that's out there, and you could do this on any radio, like I was talking about, FRS, GMRS, ham radio. This is your family plan. The 3 every 3 hours. Always use your local team time for that. At noon, 3, 6 p.m., 9, midnight, whatever. Establish that. Meet on channel 3 for every 3 hours for 3 minutes. So that's kind of one of the standard ones that's out there. But the idea is just to start something and get that going, and then it doesn't hurt to train. The government trains every day. This morning, SEMA was on one of our nets here on our, we call it the MOSWIN system, and it's pretty much the whole state of Missouri connected, and they do check-ins with all the hospitals, different agencies, the weather service, just different things, and they do check-in, and they do drills, and they do training, and there's a reason why the military trains every day. That's their purpose. And once you've established that, and when panic happens, you're ready.
Yep. Exactly. Yeah, that's something as emergency manager we do as part of our job is training and exercises and making sure we're training the people on those plans and then exercising it as well on either just sitting around the table talking about it like a tabletop or actually pulling out all the fun toys and the big items and really doing that full scale there. So anyway, Clayton, it has been great talking with you this evening. Maybe just tell our viewers real quick where they can find you at. I know you're on social media on YouTube. Where what's the places we can find you at?
Sure. So, on videos wise, and I've done some videos on some of this subject too, and I'm glad you said that because there's like one video that you mentioned shortwave a while ago, and it made me think of it. I did a video that explains the different bands or bands of frequencies that people can communicate on, and that starts anywhere from long wave, short wave to medium wave to, and so that video, some of the comments I've been getting is you have a way of simplifying this for me, but the problem is my brain, I'm thinking so totally nerded out, but somehow I'm able to kind of slow it down, and I think a lot of it is in my mind. I keep telling myself, okay, don't do that, don't geek out. So I'm just constantly reminding myself. So if you go on YouTube, just look for disaster communications, and you'll know it's it because I have a black background logo, and it just says disaster communications, get information, give information. So that's our slogan. We're on TikTok, same name, and Instagram. I think it's on Facebook too.
Perfect. All right. Well, it has been a pleasure to have you on. I will try to have you on maybe in the future. We can geek out some more on some radio stuff. I always like to really dive into different subjects, and this is a subject that today and I think moving forward, and even 20 years ago is was relevant and is still relevant today. So, something that we need to emphasize as preppers or people that are just starting the prepping community to really hone in, not on those the resources like the food and the water and those types of things, but also some communication resources. So I hope everyone enjoyed the first episode of season 2. Stay tuned. We have some exciting things, exciting guests lined up here on the All Hazards Prepper. I hope everyone has a safe and great day. The All Hazards Prepper out.